Chapter 4. The Chase. To my beloved daughter, Maria Maddalena, there is no doubt in my mind that you will feel some great anger at my willful neglect towards you. You are owed a heartfelt apology and a detailed explanation about my absence. Unfortunately, time is against us. Please know that I regret my actions, deeply and wholly. I have done wrong by you and have now lost my chance to seek or earn your forgiveness. A disaster is unfolding around me, and soon it will envelop you as well. I realize that you probably feel no compulsion to do anything I request, but I must make said request nonetheless. I ask you to read this letter in its entirety before deciding what to do. The girl who delivered this letter to you is named Cassandra. She was at the very center of the disaster I've mentioned. She witnessed terrible things, and terrible things have been done to her. She needs to be kept safe, and until recently, I was providing for her safety. However, this is no longer possible. Enemies are coming for me. They seek to take Cassandra. Inez, my daughter, I'm begging you. Please take charge of Cassandra. Keep her safe until I can retrieve her. By the time this letter reaches you, I will already be on my way, so you will not have to wait long. Do not ask her about what happened. Do not do anything to frighten her. And most importantly of all, do not, under any circumstances, allow anyone to take Cassandra from you, especially if they are from the United Nations government. While there are many people who could be a danger, you can trust a select few. Should you ever feel in danger, seek out a group of people in the Detroit area called the Wolverines. They are friends and allies of mine, and they will keep you safe. I beg you to do this, and I swear I will give you a full explanation of my transgressions against you when I return. You do not need to forgive me. I know I have done nothing to earn it. But please, do not vent your fury at me upon the child. Cassandra is innocent and a victim. Help me save her, please. Always your father, Professor Emmanuel Luis Espinosa Perez, Chief Director, UN Science Directorate, Physics Division. Inez looked up from the letter at Cassandra. The young girl cast her eyes down, unwilling to meet Inez's gaze. Opal and her family had fallen silent while the letter was read aloud, but now they were slowly starting to stir. Like Inez, the Anwards wanted to ask a million questions, but she spoke first. "You know my dad?" Inez started to say. But she never finished her question. She was interrupted by a second knock on the door. This time, Opal moved first, maneuvering around her father and brother, and opened the front door again. It was dark outside, but two silhouettes were visible on the porch. "Hello?" Opal asked as she opened the door. "I'm so sorry, but this is a bad time." "This won't take long," replied a man's voice. "My name is Yasin Ackerman, and my comrade here is Malachi. We're from the UN Human Rights Council in Berlin." Opal squeaked in fear. Both men pushed their way past her and forced their way into the apartment. Inez looked up from the letter to see that Yasin was a tall and skinny guy with outrageous sideburns descending from a mop of brown hair. His face, sharp and angled, looked naturally sinister. Malachi, a brown-skinned man with dark eyes, was dressed very differently from Yasin. Instead of a business suit, Malachi wore a green cloak and hood over top of a simple shirt and slacks. Inez instantly recognized Malachi as an acolyte of the cult of Jericho. Montry tried to stand between these men and the girls, reprimanding them for barging into the house without permission. "This place belongs to me, and I did not invite you in," he snarled. Yasin looked around the room and spotted Cassandra. His eyes narrowed at her, and she looked at the floor, hiding her face with her hands. In a voice so low one could mistake it for a growl, Yasin said, "That is true. Yet two of the people we are looking for are standing in your living room. Yasin crossed the room in 2 great strides and came face to face with Inez. So you are Maria Magdalena, he said. Would her father happen to be here at the moment? Inez was struck dumb, and judging from their silence, so was the Anward family. The question made no sense to them whatsoever. Montri tried to say as much, but Yasin gave a hand signal to Malachi, who moved away from the group. Malachi walked further into the house, opening all of the doors in the hallway. Even though he was out of sight, everyone could hear Malachi loudly searching each room, sifting through closets and bedsheets with meticulous energy. You must have made some kind of mistake, sir. Montri spoke while he continued shielding Inez and Cassandra. Miss Espinosa hasn't seen hide nor hair of her father for half a decade. With unexpected force, Yasin put one hand on Montri's shoulder and shoved him aside, addressing his words to Inez. So you are the professor's daughter, Yasin growled. I must say, you do take after your mother. Your eyes are just like hers. I feel like you could be staring into my soul right now. Inez took a step back and raised her right arm to one side, corralling little Cassandra until she was hidden behind her. She was feeling very frightened. Something about this guy was setting off every mental alarm. Something was about to go horribly wrong. She knew it. Is that true? She asked. You're both from the UN? Yasin nodded. Quite right, he confirmed. The Human Rights Council sent us here on the orders of your parents. That girl behind you, Cassandra, is under our jurisdiction. We've come to take her someplace where she'll be safe. Inez made up her mind in an instant. She didn't know if it was the right decision or the wrong one, but she was committed. She puffed up her chest and mustered up the most defiant voice she could. Bullshit! You need to get out! Yasin's faint half-smile vanished. Montri and Opal looked at Inez, shocked. What? Why? Yasin asked. He hadn't seen the note. My dad gave this girl a note, Inez quickly explained. Said to guard her until he comes for her. Thinking on his feet, Yasin changed tactics. He took a step back and made a friendly hand gesture. Of course, this girl needs to be protected. Quite right, Inez. But you can't keep her safe. That's why Professor Espinosa sent us. Understand? Inez stood her ground and quoted her father's letter. Do not allow anyone to take her from you, especially if they are from the United Nations. Montri now stood by Inez, helping her block Cassandra from the UN official. Sir, I think you need to explain yourself in full before we call the police. Yasin tried to be accommodating, but he was clearly about to lose his temper. There is a simple explanation for all this. A voice yelled out from the apartment door. You're damned right there is! Everyone spun around to look. Standing in the threshold was a man with grayish blonde hair and hazel eyes. He was dressed in a business suit, stained and dirtied from a long period of travel. Even though she had not seen him for over 5 years, Inez needed only 3 seconds to recognize who this person was. Dad? She gasped. Is that really you? Professor Emmanuel Espinosa looked rugged, as though he'd been on the road for weeks. His face was gaunt and his eyes wide. And as Emmanuel raised one hand to point at his daughter, it trembled and shook. Nazi! Don't let those men anywhere near Cassandra! Yasin's voice sounded combative. She's under UN jurisdiction, Professor Espinosa. We have the right to take her. Are you out of your mind? Emmanuel shouted. After I showed you what happened to Scarlett, you're still doing her dirty work? At the mention of her mother's name, Inez's breath caught in her throat. She took a staggering step towards her father. "Wait, what's happened to Mom?" she blurted out. Emmanuel and Yasan both looked at her. Yasan opened his mouth to speak, but the professor beat him to it. "She's dead! Scarlett is gone, and this is the truth about her!" Emmanuel reached into his coat and pulled out a tattered old newspaper. Inez briefly saw the words Chicago Tribune, but before she could take a longer look, Yasin grabbed Emmanuel's shoulder and hollered, "Malachi! He's here! Espinosa's here!" A fight broke out. Inez screamed as her father slugged Yasin in the face. Opal fell backwards as Malachi shoved past her into the fray. Montri collapsed to the floor as he tried to get near. Cassandra squealed and grabbed the back of Inez's shirt. Both UN officials dogpiled onto Emmanuel, who shouted, "Inez, run! Take the girl and get her to Varian Robinson!" Screaming, Cassandra bolted for the door. Behind them, Montri and Flint sprang into action. Opal's father jumped on top of the two UN officials and started beating them with his fists. Flint intercepted Inez while she was trying to grab the newspaper, which fell to the floor amongst the battling bodies. Flint tugged on her hand while Emmanuel shouted, "Don't let them take Cassandra to Florida! She cannot go to Florida!" Flint, Opal, Cassandra, and Inez crashed out the front door. The little girl tried to run for the road, but Flint caught her around the middle and started pushing both Cassandra and Inez towards the garage. Opal pulled a rope to open the door, yelling, "Over here! Over here!" Inside the house, Inez could hear more shouting. "Hold him down, Malachi! Opal, call for help! Romeo 2, calling Juliet 1! We need backup! Send backup!" Meanwhile, Opal wrenched the garage door open and she grabbed some kind of machine. With all her strength, Opal pulled the contraption out of the garage and into the driveway. "What's that thing?" Cassandra asked. It was a bicycle, the biggest, bulkiest thing she'd ever seen. Inez had never seen a bicycle like this one. It had a silver and gray engine mounted between the wheels with big metal pipes sticking out near the back. Flint kicked a small lever by the motor and the whole thing made a loud booming noise. The giant bike rattled and shook and thundered like a storm. After a moment, Inez realized she was looking at an old-world motorcycle. "Do you know how to ride?" Flint asked Inez. "Wait a minute," she gasped. "Wait a minute, doesn't this thing run on gasoline? Please tell me it doesn't run on gas. Gas explodes, you know." But before Flint could reply, the loud whine of an electric engine filled the night. A vehicle, boxy in shape and rolling on 6 heavy wheels, came roaring round the corner. Its headlights filling the driveway and yard, the vehicle was painted white and had the words United Nations Reclamation Agency painted in black on each side. This was an armored personnel carrier, the same type UN soldiers used to move around the city. But Inez had never seen one moving so fast before. The APC drove into the yard at full speed, digging deep ruts into the grass. It overshot Inez and her friends before smashing into Opal's house with a horrific crash. Glass windows shattered and roof tiles fell into the yard. Fluffy pink insulation blew away in the wind as half of the building collapsed. From inside there were screams of terror, followed up by the appearance of Malachi. The big UN agent pulled himself out of the splintered remains of what had once been the porch and then waved at the APC. A hatch opened on the turret and a man wearing a blue UN Army helmet appeared. Malachi pointed towards Inez and hollered, "There she is! Over there! That woman is taking subject too!" Flint grabbed Inez and forced her to straddle the giant metal bike. The vibrating chassis and loud engine frightened her far more than the armored vehicle. A moment later, Cassandra found herself on the back of the seat, her arms wrapped tightly around Inez's waist. "Do you know how to ride?" Flint asked one more time. "I ride normal bikes," Inez cried out. "You know, electric ones." "It's the same principle." Opal yelled over the painfully loud motorcycle engine. "Just run away! Get away from here, quick!" The loud revving told Inez the APC was about to spring into movement once again. She gripped the handlebars, got low in the seat, and told Cassandra to hold on as tight as she could. Then Inez opened up the throttle, sending the motorcycle roaring away into the night. Behind the escaping girls, Opal and Flint scattered just in time. The APC disentangled itself from Opal's house and rocketed forward, accelerating down the street after Inez and Cassandra. The motorcycle was nothing like the electric bikes Inez rode before. Each time she opened the throttle, Inez felt as though she was going to lose her hearing. The noise of it was overpowering, to the point where she couldn't hear Cassandra's voice, and the little girl was holding onto her for dear life. The bike was fast, but it couldn't turn corners like electric bikes. It was too heavy, too bulky. Instead, Inez found a straight road and started to accelerate. She had no plan. She just wanted to escape from the army vehicle behind her. The APC was very quiet in comparison to this bike, but she knew it was still there. Its headlights flashed in the motorcycle's rear view mirrors. Inez spotted the main road and found herself roaring into downtown Novi, on the outskirts of Detroit. Now the street was full of cars, sleek and silent. Hyper-modern electric cars moved up and down the lanes as people went about their business. Inez leaned hard into the bike, weaving through lanes of traffic and avoiding cars. About half a mile ahead, Inez spotted an electric bicycle doing the same thing. Copying its movements, Inez soon managed to place about 100 yards and some 20 cars between herself and the pursuing APC. Suddenly, Cassandra gripped Inez so hard that her fingernails dug into Inez's belly. Panicking, Inez looked over her shoulder. The APC was going straight through the traffic. Moving at top speed, the military vehicle was ramming and pushing its way through one car after another. Terrified motorists pulled to the side of the road, desperate to avoid the oncoming behemoth. A mother with 2 children in her van screamed in terror as the APC rammed into the back of her van. She lost control and spun off the street entirely before the van with its family of 3 crashed headlong into the city bank. Ignoring the fiery car crash behind it, the APC pressed on, closing the distance between itself and the motorcycle. Inez pinned the throttle and drove the bike through an intersection, missing a group of people by inches. Cassandra looked at them and shrieked, "Look out, you guys!" In unison, the entire crowd of pedestrians leapt back as the APC soared through as well, not braking even for an instant. Inez wasn't thinking anymore. Acting on instinct, she ducked and wove and threaded her bike through the city streets, which seemed to be getting more and more crowded. Partygoers were pouring out of bars, theaters, clubs, and arenas to watch the chase, which was shaping up to be more entertaining than whatever nightlife Novi had to offer. The APC was now so close that Inez and Cassandra could feel the heat of its headlamps. They weren't going to get away by sheer speed, and Inez knew it. She needed another option, a new escape route. Then a flickering display of lights caught her attention. Inez, Cassandra, and their pursuers were passing by a train station. Of course! 50 years ago, the Advent government constructed a vast network of rail lines all over the planet. Even though the alien overlords had been overthrown, their high-speed transport system remained. Keeping the railroad tracks in her peripheral vision, Inez threaded the motorcycle down an alleyway and out onto a side street. She could see the railroad tracks, but they were separated from the road by a heavy chain-link fence, topped with barbed wire. All she needed was some kind of break or gate. Behind her, Cassandra screamed as the APC reappeared, having detoured down another street. The top hatch was open again, and a UN soldier was visible, talking into a radio as he observed the chase. "There!" Inez shouted. Her heart rose as she spotted a bend in the road. There was going to be a crossing, an opportunity to cross the train tracks. Only Inez had no intention of actually crossing the tracks. She was betting the APC was far less capable than her motorcycle. Inez banked hard and felt Cassandra seize up in terror as she turned sharply again. With a great many thuds and thumps, the motorcycle was roaring down the dirt track in between two sets of railroad lines. The northbound rail was on Inez's right, and the southbound lane on her left. Inez accelerated hard and cheered. There was no way for the UN to follow her through here, right? Wrong. The APC turned hard and mounted the rail line. Its tires thudded loudly as it bore down the railroad towards the fleeing motorcycle at nearly top speed. In just a few seconds, the APC was dangerously close once again. To make matters even worse, Inez was starting to feel a searing pain in her thighs. Looking down, she realized the motorcycle engine itself was starting to get hot. So hot, in fact, that the metal was starting to burn Inez's legs. Somewhere in that engine was gasoline. All Inez knew about the stuff was that it was highly flammable and could explode at any moment. It was time to get off the bike. Realizing this idea wasn't going to work, Inez started looking for an opportunity to get off the railroad and back onto a street. Cassandra leaned forward and screamed in her ear, "There's a train in front of you!" In the pitch darkness of the night, Inez almost failed to see it. The rearmost carriage of a northbound passenger train loomed large in the darkness. The lights from the carriage interior were like a pair of eyes that loomed out of the dark before suddenly getting much bigger. The whole train was moving, but Inez's motorcycle was moving much faster. She made a split-second decision. Wrenching on the handlebars, Inez jumped the tracks on the left side and pulled alongside the final carriage. The passenger car had two sliding doors on the side. Keeping the bike straight with one hand, Inez pressed her right hand, trying to open the rearmost door. Cassandra did her best as well, but the door wasn't budging. It was locked. Men and women were crowding the back of the carriage to look out the window and see what the commotion was. The APC had also jumped the tracks and was now on the southbound railroad. It pulled up level with the motorcycle and then started closing the distance. Inez and Cassandra were sandwiched between the train and the APC. The door to the passenger compartment wasn't opening. They were trapped. Inside the passenger compartment, two people saw the scene unfolding outside and sprang into action. The first was a Caucasian man in his middle ages. He wore worker's clothes and looked generally exhausted. A mop of messy brown hair and stubble showed how little thought he gave to his appearance. He started pushing past the crowd of onlookers toward the same door Inez was banging her fist against. "What the hell are you doing?" an irate passenger yelled. "Those girls need help!" he cried out in reply. At the same time, a Caucasian woman with vivid red hair fought her way to the front of the carriage. She seized the emergency stop lever in one hand, but hesitated. "Ready!" she called out to her companion. The workman finally reached the door, and with one Herculean effort, he pulled it open, blasting everybody in the carriage with cold night air. Inez throttled up the motorcycle and pulled forward, shouting, "The girl! Take the girl!" The grizzled man leaned down and seized Cassandra around the middle. He pulled her up and into the carriage just before the APC closed in for the kill. The heavy, armored vehicle finally made contact with the motorcycle, pushing the bike into the side of the train. Inez screamed as her thigh was pinned against the hot metal of the engine, but a moment later, a pair of hands grabbed her under each arm and started to pull. Looking up, Inez saw the workman starting to pull her into the train and would have given a cry of thanks, if not for a sudden, vice-like feeling on her ankle. A UN soldier had clambered all the way out of the turret and had grabbed Inez by the leg. His bright blue helmet shone in the glittering light of the city and the train in the moonlight. With one hand, he gripped the railing of the turret, and with the other, he started pulling Inez back toward himself, but it was only for a moment. The workman looked over his shoulder and yelled, "Do it now!" The red-haired woman threw the emergency stop lever. For one moment, all three vehicles, the train, the APC, and the motorcycle, were all traveling at the same speed in the same direction. Then the train abruptly started to slow down. Inez was pulled free of the motorcycle and it instantly lost control, swerving and flailing about before somehow ending up underneath the APC's wheels. The armored vehicle swerved and hit the passenger car with its nose before rebounding, jumping the tracks, and leaving the railroad entirely. The APC sailed on for another few yards before crashing headlong into a house and coming to a complete stop. Inez collapsed into the arms of her rescuer, and once she was sure the imminent danger was over, she became fully aware of just how much pain she was experiencing. Inez sank to the floor of the passenger car, panting. As she lay sprawled on the floor, curious people gathered around, asking questions. Some were even standing on the seats for a better view. In the midst of it all, the red-haired woman draped a jacket around Cassandra's shoulders. The scruffy man took an interest in Inez. She felt his hands rifling through her pockets, but in the moment she didn't have the strength to stop him. The adrenaline was wearing off. The workman found the letter in Inez's pocket and took it from her. She reached up and grabbed his hand to get his attention. "That girl's in trouble," Inez told him. "The UN's after her, and I need to find a group of people. They call themselves Wolverines?" Quickly, the man lowered his face to Inez's level. For a moment, Inez wondered if he was going to kiss her, but instead, he whispered in her ear. "Not so loud," he whispered. "Relax. You found two of us." On those words, Inez found the strength to sit up again. The scruffy man and his red-haired companion gave her a concerned look. The surrounding crowd was waiting with bated breath. "My name's Lansing," the man introduced himself. "Jay Lansing. The copper top over there is Sarah Roberts. What are your names?" Inez tapped herself and said, "Inez Espinosa. And she is..." "Cassandra," said the little girl. "Just Cassandra."